What does it take to create something that never existed before? What does it take to challenge the status quo? What does it take to change the world? This is the Swell podcast. We're passionate about story, experience, and designing culture, but ultimately how an idea swells into a movement. Take a journey with us as we seek the answers to those three questions through the stories of thought leaders, world builders, game changers, disruptors, and other pleasantly rebellious humans who've ventured out into the unknown on a personal journey to do something novel, innovative, creative, or disruptive. In today's episode, we chat with Nate Walkingshaw, previous Chief Experience Officer at Pluralsight and author of Chasing Confidence, Transforming Ideas into Impact. We dive into his story from his first company, the moment that changed his perspective, to his time with Pluralsight and beyond, including his passion for kinetic architecture and directed discovery, his model for putting the customer at the center of everything. And stick around because by the end, he may or may not bring out the guitar to close us out. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast, sign up to our newsletter at theswellpod.com, and get in on the conversation through all of the major socials at theswellpod. Our first season is made in partnership with Kiln. Kiln provides flex office space solutions for teams and individuals. Their all-inclusive set of amenities helps startups, creatives, and entrepreneurs alike get work done. Learn more about Kiln at kiln.co. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy.
By the way, you did notice we got our nice hoodies on for.
Oh yeah, I'm loving it. I think it's killer. Yeah. The A6 hoodie's dialed. Are you a runner?
I am. I run a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And nobody throws like legit A6 gear on for design purposes. I'm kidding you. They've got good chops over there.
Yeah. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you on. Thank you for joining, Nate. We really appreciate it. I wanted to, we love to talk about kind of what your journey's been, your past, your present, your future, and things like that. But I want to kind of get right to the meat of it. We've known each other and Josh for a few years, and that started probably at Pluralsight, knowing Pluralsight pretty well. And you were the chief product officer and experience officer and several other roles over the years. I'm going to ask you, why did you leave?
Yeah, no, I love that. The answer is super simple. Just the sheer exhaustion of, we were sub 100 employees. Just had come off of, I think, 38 million in ARR. So small, we were a small crew. We had acquired a lot of different companies, but I would just say, but finally, 11 acquisitions. We had raised $300 million. We had gone through kind of three substantial restarts on the executive team, plus a non-deal roadshow, a public IPO, and 2 years worth of, earnings calls. You do 90 callbacks, on the buy and the sell side, earnings calls. And then my team, went from 80 to, from 820 folks, almost 1,000 employees. In my final year, I was a publicly traded Section 16 officer. And I had never been a publicly traded Section 16 officer where, kind of everything in the world is, for people to take a gander at. And you're just under a lot more scrutiny, on internally at the business and then also externally in public markets as well. And yeah, it was just my time. I mean, that's like, there's zero bad blood. Like, I love the company still to this day. I love the team. I loved every single person that I worked with. Aaron and I are still extremely close friends. I'm super grateful for him. I mean, he provided a tremendous opportunity for me and my family, and some significant outcomes. And the whole team there is just, it's world class. But this is the first break I've taken in, I think 22 years, and that you have to stitch that together. I think it's super important that you do is, I started out as a firefighter paramedic making $7.14 an hour, right? I got paid, my overtime shifts, would bump you up to $10, But long story short is, if you looked at the paramedic career into paramed, which was my own, ideas for patient transport, that was a startup that took almost a decade. I went 5 years, 5 hard years, new product every year for 5 years. That got bought by Stryker. And then what happened there was I had to integrate my company into a publicly traded, 8,000 employees, 1.2 billion in annual sales, and go through their publicly traded rigor. And then came out of that and started Brightface, then OC Tanner, then Pluralsight. It was the cumulative effect. It had nothing to do with like anything specific to Pluralsight. I just smoked, like super, super smoked. So just wanted, I knew I needed to call it, but yeah, it was time. It was time, man. I have 4 sons, so I wanted to spend a ton of time with them. I wasn't anticipating COVID. It was really like a damper because, I'm in the middle of my sabbatical, and I'm not, this is a sabbatical, like a short sabbatical. This isn't like 5 years off here. It's like a year, in the holding pen and then back at it. I still have 1 or 2 more in me. But I wanted to take my kids, to Europe. I want to go see the world. I wanted to live abroad and, show, my family, do some social impact, stuff in marginalized communities around the world. And, here we are in, Sandy, Utah, confined pretty much to our house for almost a year. It's crazy.
That's tough. Yeah. I think your story is super interesting though. And I sense kind of a sigh of relief, right? From huge amount of work for a sustained, intense period through all that journey. And now time with the family is super important, but you can't go anywhere. What are you doing with the family to kind of get around that, just out of interest?
Yeah, I think if you guys could come here, you'd be like, oh my goodness, this guy, he really didn't take a break. All I did was shift the energy of what I did. Like this energy is aimed at my family, and then at, like physical, like kinetic projects. Those are the things that I dreamt about when I was, daydreaming at Pluralsight or any other. I dreamt of building buildings or structures or physical products again. And so, yeah, I'll show you a picture of something that I've been working on that's pretty fun. And yeah, we've been doing a ton of stuff.
That's amazing.
Like as funny as that is, I haven't been sitting on the couch, that's for sure. Even though there have been, I think the luxury is that I get to decide if I want to go over and take a break, or if this is, too much for the day, or, I've really, really enjoyed being able just to go ahead and take a knee and then, go do whatever I want, which has been nice.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Let me show you this. I'm going to share the screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a building that I worked on here. You guys see that okay?
I can.
Yeah.
So I'm not done with it yet, but there's a lot of things in the product world, the product nerdery of me, but flat work, I've never done flat work, walls, all the bend and weld, the aluminum, and then all these are reclaimed timbers from the Ashland National Forest from beetle kill. So literally this whole entire structure I designed in chief architect, and then built a full set of working prints, and then built this, with me and my son Sarah, and then a couple of really close friends. And yeah, I've done a couple of these things. I've done a pickleball court, a pergola. This right here will be, I don't know what it'll be yet. I'm just like, it's more about trying to get the committed to exactness around just learning how to pour flat work or concrete. But yeah.
Did you
That's
say
awesome.
You don't know what that's going to be?
Yeah, I don't know really what it's going to be. It could be like a gym or a studio, or a wood shop or a metal shop. Dimensionally, the idea was to make it a kind of a hybrid building. Like, we go through a lot of seasons in our family where we like to try a lot of stuff on, and then we kind of put our tools down and then try and build another dimension of our skill set. So I think that, using tactility, using your hands a ton, builds a totally different, area in your brain than just doing the same mundane things that you do every single day. Like moving from the desk, of working on software for 6 years, where I'm almost sure I got carpal tunnel in this hand, which is ridiculous to even say. Trying to move into, hardware, it's like a game changer. And it was really nice. I did that, 10 and a half years ago when I was at Paramed, but, to really get back into it again has just been really fulfilling. It's super, bubblegum for the mind.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you can build this thing without knowing what it will be, though. Like there's something to that, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, of course I'm familiar, and we're going to get into this directed discovery. Like, I understand that, but from my perspective, like, so I have an unfinished basement. I don't know what to do because I don't know what it will be, and it's a huge block. It's a huge block in my mind.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see, I like, that's gotta just be from your experience and your mindset to be able to go out and experiment and build this thing again with no idea of what it will be. But yeah, I mean, to see it manifest in that picture,
yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. Yeah,
That's great.
You learn to roll with it.
Yeah,
and that just I think mentioned that's within an orchard, right? Or at least an orchard very close by that you also manage.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Our tree farm, like the tree farm, is on that same patch of land.
That's great. We're going to probably get into maybe revisit that of where, you're kind of going into the unknown. You're just going with your gut feel or your passions. You're just trying new things, whether or not that connects to your future initiatives or problems you might want to solve. We'd love to get into that maybe later on in the conversation. But I wanted to kind of just go back to the where it began. So you have this great book that we've read, Chasing Confidence, and we'd love you to tell you a little bit about that pivotal moment of where things changed for you and what you learned.
Yeah, I think, kind of maybe the bigger theme is like, as we're raised, we have all these different experiences that define ultimately, who we are as human beings. Like the very words that are coming out of my mouth, the person that's sitting in this chair is just a culmination of all of these different interactions and experiences that I've had. And I think, current best thinking for me today is, as I've gone through, a lot of, and I would say failures by far, have shaped a lot more of my successes. I say the cumulative effect of my failures are in spades, like much deeper and broader on what's kind of honed the tools to kind of be just able to be in it when things either are uncertain or unknown, or we need to organize a lot of people against it. But I would say, the moment that I decided to leave college and this conversation with my dad on my front lawn on, what that would look like for me, that was a huge pivotal moment for me. Going from, quote unquote, a 5-year MBA in international business, minor in German, and just dropped the tools and said, hey, I want to serve. I'd much rather spend time in the back of an ambulance getting to understand, human behavior and human beings. And I was on the community service board at my high school, and that was extremely fulfilling. And then my cousin was also a paramedic, and those three influences had great educators. I had a really great, family member, and Andy drove up to my house in his ambulance. I was at my grandma's house, and he said, hey, do you want to come on a ride along? And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, well, you can jump in the back of the ambulance and come on a few calls. I was like, really? And I'm like, well, what do I have to sign? He's like, well, you have a 1-page waiver, but you can jump in. I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So, I signed this waiver and I jumped in the back of the ambulance with Andy, and it's like my whole world completely changed. And it was super scary to bail college to go do this, like to have this conversation with my family. Was tough. Like there was a lot of sacrifices to get me into these schools and to the education that I had, and just to drop it and go for it. Really a lot of insecurities, a lot of stuff happened. So I'd say that was one of the biggest moments. Second biggest moment was creating a product for me, not for we. So, I was an emergency medical technician, and I thought I'd invented the best thing since sliced bread. And at the end of the day, I got punched in the face. I mean, it was It was brutal, absolutely brutal. I mean, I was absolutely convinced. I had raised money. Angel money at that time is like late 90s. So like $25,000 at a time. And I told these investors I'd give them all their money back, you know, and some. And when I took my product into New York, and I had New York City paramedics that were mounting these ambulance cot tracks onto the bottom of their ambulance cot so we didn't have to carry patients. And I literally pulled it out of the rep's truck, and he laughed. He laughed straight in my face. He's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Well, this is going to save your back. It's going to save your career." And I think he used some nice expletives like, "This is not going to save, you know, drac crap for you." You know, like this is horrible. And I'm like, "No, it's not. This is amazing. This is the best thing. Like, dude, let's just use it." And he's like, "I'm not gonna use it." He's like, "How is that gonna even fit in there?" And we're in front of a brownstone apartment, right? And I like opened the door, looked up the stairwell, and I was like, "Whoa." And I'm like, "Well, there has to be like other conditions than other this." And he's like, "Look around. You know, look. This is our district. This is what we call into every single day. There's no way it's working." And then, you know, went to Florida. The water table's too high. There's no basements. Went to the Dakotas, like it's sub 30 below. You know, so I made it out of high density polyethylene and, you know, a lot of different metallurgies that are just not going to work. They're going to be way too brittle, especially in really like cold climates. And I'm like, well, everything looks like Utah. Yeah, no, like paramedics don't behave the same. You know, patients don't behave the same. Conditions aren't the same. Buildings aren't the same. Like nothing is the same. And that was I would say the birth of directed discovery was, I need a framework that keeps, you know, for all purposes, for CEOs, I think CEOs, leaders, all the way down to individual contributors and product managers, to keep you on the rails. You just need mile markers, guideposts, a framework that keeps you honest with yourself, that keeps the teams honest with themselves. Because we have this need to have this unconscious bias, whether it's expediency or recency. You know, like everything has this unconscious bias to it, and you need a framework that like racks you, you know, right back into the middle of the road and orients you to say, hey, like, what are we doing? Why are we here? And are we way committed to ourselves in this? Is this actually going to solve a problem? And the second I started asking customers what they wanted, it was over. I'm like, oh, this is so easy. I'm like, I just have to aggregate what they're telling me. That's crazy. With innovation, right? I mean, that's not like, you just don't build what somebody tells you to build, right? But this gives you direction. It gives you kind of like the lump, if you will, the lump sum of the idea that you need to start shaping. And then from there, you can be able to infuse it with, you know, data science or machine learning or, you know, any type of, you know, the way patents work is you're supposed to reduce the number of working components to make it more patentable. Like when we came up with ambulance cots, you know, you don't want to build a cot with more bells and whistles. You want to actually reduce the number of bells and whistles, right? And then increase the functionality and innovation. That's IP. That's intellectual property. And so as soon as you start to shape and mold those ideas with your team around, you know, hey, this is what we're aimed at. This is what's possible. Dude, it's magic. You know, people become the hardest thing to manage, not products. Like products are cake to build now. It's the people, like the teams, the management, the scale, the behavior, because we all come from different walks of life, you know, with all these different experiences, which is a huge benefit, by the way. But getting them around these ideas and these concepts is, yeah, full-time job.
Wow. I love that. And there's so many different directions I think I'd like to go down, but we can only choose one. But just before we maybe talk about the directed discovery or the getting close to the customers, to really find out what the problems are. I kind of want to go back to that decision point that you had with your, you know, going away from college, and there's challenging conversations with your family, who obviously, you know, ended up being super supportive of you. But what was it like? What helped you make the decision? Was it a feeling? Like, how did you make the decision to do that?
Yeah, I think that's a super powerful question to ask. And I think it's nuanced, and I hope people, like, when they hear this, they actually spend some time thinking about the decisions that they've made. This was a moment in time that I decided, well, I would say it was the first step in becoming who Nate Walkingshaw ultimately was going to be. Like we're byproducts of the things that we're raised in, right? So, my parents are like seriously just incredible humans, but by and large, I am a byproduct of their direct leadership, mentoring, guidance, even their context that they create in my life. And I would say that the moment I didn't know, I would say the 5-year MBA, International Business with a minor in German, was more of a concept that my family and specifically my mom and dad created for me. This is what, in order for you to have material success, this was a path that you need to take, or you could take, or you should take to become, successful. And whatever that was defined as at that point in time. And this was I'd say the tipping point to say, I'm not sure if that outcome of success works for who I want to become. I'm not sure if that's going to align to, my current core values. And it wasn't the career path was wrong, is that I found myself being much more service oriented, much more human, much more empathetic. Like the business, was not something that was like really formed. Like I would go to these classes in macro, micro, econ. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's really cool to learn, about these different concepts. But when I went with Andy, I mean, it was overwhelming. Like the amount of empathy, the amount of emotion, the amount of connection. But I would tell you, the possibility to learn how to save a human life was extremely valuable. And that became, I mean, seriously, in one days of ride-alongs, it became a part of my identity. And I'm like, I want to go explore who that person could be. And every single time I pulled on the thread of that, I understood more about who I am, how I was built, and how to kind of pay myself first so I could be a better person, for relationships around me and for people around me. And, people in the back of the ambulance, my partners, I mean, they probably taught me the most. I mean, I still have patients in my head that, taught me massive concepts that I could have never learned on my own. There's no way.
Well, what's so fascinating about this is like hearing you talk about these specific moments, like it makes sense for you as what was a chief experience officer. I think like it seems like you understand the importance of these moments, like in a way that I'm not sure a lot of people do, but in both maybe in the moment, but definitely reflectively, right? And I think what's so interesting about this is, I think that I guess it's more of a question, but do you look at as an experience through life? Do you look at like I'm very open to as many experiences as I can get, so I can continue to collect and curate myself and combine different things with other things? Like, are you really open to experience? Is that part of what makes Nate
Yeah.
Nate?
Yeah, 100%. I think that is probably like the next pivot that I go into in my life. I mean, I was started in medical devices, then hardware, and then in software. I can tell you this next step will be nowhere near the other two locations that I was in, most likely. Like that, I think that there's a whole nother world that needs to probably for my creative, I guess, state. Like there's a whole nother world I'd want to step into to start pulling on different threads. And I would like, Josh, I would use it like guitar. Like I would say guitar in my younger years. I mean, I was good at like 4 chords and a song or two, and I'd write a song and then I replay like these 3 or 6 songs that I'd know. I don't know what it is, but I can pick a guitar up now and I'm like into different creative spaces, like chording that I could never put together. Like I had like a cognitive block for some reason. But I do believe that the development of this skill set has allowed me to create new sounds on a guitar that I will sometimes look at my fingers and I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, how is this happening? This is so cool that I'm in these areas of this songwriting that I've never been in before. And I would say life for me is a lot like that. I really love headwinds. I like challenge, but I like doing it with people. And a lot of it, people don't see their own potential. Like growing people is exciting. Like to watch somebody take on something that they never thought they could do and then they master it and you just sit back in your chair and like, look at you go. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. I know we want to get into directed discovery, but I want to talk about something because I think it relates to what you just said. That's in your book, Chasing Confidence, and there's a comparison, like in my mind, between pace. You talk about the tortoise and you talk about the hare, right? And there, of course, is this preconceived notion that working in a certain way, meaning really, really fast, is the way to go. But I love the way that you break down directed discovery. But I don't necessarily want to dive into that right now. I'm interested to know, I think, as you look at experiences through life, like those moments when you're identifying new chords, your fingers are being put into play new music. Like, how do you look at pace then through the experience of not just, work, but, which is, I think, in directed discovery, but your pace through all of these different opportunities, all of these different jobs. And when you look at the moment that you're in right now, like, I think you've channeled your energy into a new area, but the pace may feel a little bit different. And I think that allows, from a creative standpoint.
Yeah, I think
really
it's actually pretty incredible that you and Spence can break apart a question for an audience to listen to, because again, like these are like really subtle, super important nuances that I think are great for mental fitness, like for good mental health and fitness, especially right now. And I would say the example for everyone to try on is that a simple one is like, look, I'm in the context of a dad, I'm in the context of a husband, I'm in the context of a CXO, I'm in the context of being a best friend, I'm in the context of being a son. I can just add, I'm in the context of building a home.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, if people could actually fly above that and then not mash, because right now everyone mashes everything together. And then what happens is when they wake up in the day, it is just squished and it's overwhelming. It creates a ton of stress. The most precious gift we have in this world is time. Like, we all have the same amount of it, by the way. Like, we all have the same 24 hours. And so, like, really what we need to be fantastic at is when we wake up in the morning, even, some people are planners. They got to plan 3 months out. And that never works for me, because that's not the way life works. Like, life doesn't, you don't wake up and then execute the plan. It's more about your ability to navigate the context you have to be throughout the day. That's like probably the most important thing I think that you could probably, wrap your head around is, hey, my son comes in, how present am I going to be for Ryder? Like, am I going to be on my phone on this podcast? Am I going to put everything down, look him in the eyes and be like, hey buddy, what's up? And then he wants to tell me something that's really important to him. And I have to pick my head back up, move out of that context as a father, and then come on and do a podcast, and I want to be very present for this podcast. I want 110% of my effort to be dedicated to the communication, the style, the audience that could potentially listen and gain something from this. I want this to be impactful to you too. I want to perform. I want to be the very best engaged person I can. And then, I'm going to have to go and put a roof on that structure I just showed you today. And so I'm going to put my coveralls on and get my tools on, and then I'm going to be committed to exactness in the roof today. And so, look, I want a 2-foot overhang on either side. Like, I've already thought through, okay, what hangers, what joists I need, what 3/4 inch ply CDX I need to lay down. Like, I've thought through, okay, here's the bill of materials. And then I need to just pace myself slowly through making sure I build this roof. And I think, Josh, that's been the key for me, is that whenever I've mushed it together, sped through it, or I've not gone quick enough, I've missed a train stop. And a train stop's been a big opportunity. And I'm like, oof, brutal. Like, I got in my own way. I wrote my own story. And I completely blew a wonderful missed opportunity. Like, dude, I think it's an awesome question. And I have a ton of passion around the narrative of that question specifically.
Well, so let me just dive in one more time, I guess, a little bit deeper, and then we can jump into directed discovery. But I'm interested then because, I am in the context of this and this and this, and I think being very deliberately mindful in those moments is, I think, important. But I want to go back to what was his name? I can't remember his name now. Brendan Dawes. Yeah, Brendan. Thank you. he talks about his process. I mean, there's the process that everybody know, that he showed up on his screen, but it's more about how he kind of talks about what he does. And he talks about, I collect, I curate, and then I combine. And so like, I'm interested in just, I guess, diving into that idea about if you can be very deliberately mindful in these moments where you're a dad, or where you're building a home, or where you're doing X, right? But then at some point being deliberate about the moments when maybe those things come together, right? When you do mishmash them together to create something that is curated and combined into something completely unique. Like, do you put those moments together? Like, do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think reflectively, sure. And I would say that, my failures have woken me up to pay attention to them now. I would say as a young entrepreneur starting my business, disaster, dead bodies everywhere. Like, I mean, I did not know how to lead. I didn't know how to manage. I was committed to looking good. I felt like I wasn't good enough. The college dropout thing created a whole bad side of my persona, which is every time I walked into a room and somebody had a mechanical engineering degree, or somebody was like well-educated, I'm like, well, I can be better than you, because I had to work at it. Like, I mean, I wrote that story that, I had to be a certain persona for a certain group of people, and it was a disaster. So none of those things were, I had to learn all of that over time. And from people giving me really direct feedback, like communication styles horrible, or do you realize that you've really hurt someone's feelings over here by, making a comment that you could do it better than them, and I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. I mean, I had no idea the boat anchor I was driving, dragging behind me when I was interacting, in these companies or startups or these different teams. And so, no, I mean, none of that. Like now, I mean, if I use this building example out here, like I had to do the research that these steel posts were 5x5 with 17 foot-pounds or 17 square inches, of load. Well, I had to look at snow loads in 84092, and I had to look at, how much snow drift I'd get on one. And then I knew that I need to be 5 foot on center in order to carry that load. Yeah. I mean, that's committed to exactness. Did I still build the building in, 6 days? 100%, but that is a totally different refined skill set. Like the way I'm speeding through building a structure, that more is about a personal performance or goal, because I want to disrupt the way that structures are built. Because I actually think that needs to be unbundled and then rebundled. And so more of that is like a social experiment for myself to see if I can unbundle and rebundle buildings and materials, right? And still come out with the same product that somebody could walk through and be like, yes, this is awesome. And then when it has to go through a 4-way inspection, it's a breeze. Like, it checks all the boxes, but the path I took, the way I got there, the way it was built, had a lot of innovation in it. And that is fun. Like, I mean, I think that's like kind of the the purpose in it all. Like, I don't know. Like, I wake up and I'm like, man, it's so cool. So cool. I get the opportunity just to do this.
It's so good. By the way, so far, I've loved just like, it's resonating with me what you're saying so much. I've had goosebumps a couple of times when you were talking about just how important those pivotal moments were. And I think I just love your openness about and the way that you think. Yeah, Josh, sorry, I cut you off.
No, you didn't. I think, it's a good segue probably into directed discovery, into talking a little bit more about that, because I think that is evoked through the book. I think your mindset is in the book, and in my mind, it's applicable in so many different ways. But I do think we, at some point through what you just mentioned, maybe talked to, which we'll come back to in the end, but probably hinted at maybe the problems that you're trying to solve now going into the future a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. But yeah, do you want to talk about then directed discovery and just kind of give people who might not have any idea about what it is, just an insight into the framework itself and how it's supposed to work?
Yeah, I think I always say this. I mean, directed discovery was never meant to be a big or monetizable framework. It's always been, open source, and it's meant to be one built upon two. I never built it for teams or influencing teams. Like, it just through I maybe it's just word of mouth or whatever. It's, kind of injected itself into a lot of different product development processes. But the antithesis, of it was to oppose me, like as a human. I mean, it was always meant to put me back on the rails. It was mile markers and guideposts. You weren't ever like supposed to follow this like a religion. We laugh about agile, the framework that was built, but I mean, that is a framework that was put on people and then was turned into a very rigorous process. And I can tell you, that community that built that framework had never thought or never wanted it to become that. They were trying to shift so many different concepts and ideas away from this manufactured, perspective. And mine is more, I would say, as I've gotten older and I've thought about like, what is the job or what is this thing really doing? And really what it's doing is it's trying to harness concepts around human behavior, like human patterns. Like, what do we normally do if we go solve a problem? We have a lot of unconscious bias, a lot of ego. We're ran by a lot of things by the way that we're raised. Like you have to move outside yourself to a group of teams, but most importantly, like you have to change an entire company culture for product development. Like I have to get thousands of people to believe. Now, what's crazy to think about there is like, that is such a small idea. Like if Pluralsight's 2,000 employees, but Pluralsight sells its product to millions of learners. I mean, 18,000 business customers. So, from the very point of origin all the way through messaging, marketing, utilization, everything that you do to build a product and get it in the market and have it adopted, I feel like you have to have this this perspective or this approach, which is, the customer breaks the tie. At the end of the day, the customer sits in everything that we do. And the team is given the opportunity or gifted the opportunity to try and amalgamate and change and shape that idea into a product. And then the gift is customer relation. Like, when you see somebody grab your product and use it and you see this smile and they're like, oh, no way, man, that is so good. I mean, the products that you have picked up in your hand or you've seen and you've just kind of leaned back in your chair like, oh, fun. And, I think, teams, I think teams should work for that. It's not revenue. It's not billings. Like all those things are byproducts. It's not corporate KPIs. It is customer elation and satisfaction. And then a KPI, likelihood to buy, length of stay, net promoter score is the best way to orally communicate it to this audience, for, aggregated qualitative feedback, not a numeric score, right, is the best way. But, is this customer evangelizing this beautiful thing that the team's built? And then will they pay money for it? And do they feel like it's a fair price for what they paid? And then will they continue to buy it over and over? Like, it's so simple. I see companies just take this idea of metrics and really complicate it. It's 3 metrics. It's how much did people pay? Would they be willing to rebuy or pay for that again with the same dollar amount? And did you absolutely knock their socks off when they used it? And if you continue to keep doing that as a team, like what else is there? Like that, like sales and numbers aren't hard. Like that's cake. You can go kill that. But if you don't give them that magic every time, it's tough.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier, didn't we, Josh? Just around how important it is to get close to the customer and how impressed I was, and several people have been around how you used to do that with director discovery. Hundreds. We observed those interviews that you do each week and watch the skills. And I think I'm interested to know some of the challenges that for companies to get there. In a smaller company, you have less layers, right? You can have that relationship maybe with the customer. I'm interested to know some of those challenges that you faced and what some of the skills are as well to really, understand and empathize with the customers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get pretty specific. I mean, this is like really, you and I could spend all day on this topic on how to navigate, big institutions. I always call it the Martha Stewart magic. Martha Stewart can bake you one of the best damn chocolate chip cookies you've ever eaten. And she also can fly up and run $1 billion company, and she can manage up, out, and down that business exceptionally well. I mean, she's doing commercials with Snoop Dogg right now. I mean, like if you like look at the skill set seriously on how she can span, but when she gets into a kitchen, she's a practitioner. So an individual contributor can sit next to her and she can actually still teach a day-to-day use individual contributor how to make these little nuances to make the best cookie you've ever had. And I think that is one of the specials. I think you have hard and soft skills, but the soft skills of a human being that needs to manage a large, big organization through cultural change is that you have to bring an IC, an individual contributor's context to a board. And then you actually have to be able to take that concept and connect it to their customers. And then you have to bring that back through the CFO, the CEO, like all of the people that sit around that table. You have to be able to, hey, I'm talking to the CFO. What does the CFO matter? Like what does he care about right now? And if you can navigate your ability to kind of interject into each one of those domains and be able to interplay, it's a tremendous amount of work. That's why it's not often seen that much, is because essentially what you're doing is a human researcher, and then you're understanding all the nuances of a company and then the nuances of the roles that we have to take. And then you have to be an amazing storyteller. You have to tell the story of the customer, tell the story of the team, tell the story of the board and the CEO, and you have to get everyone in the boat rowing the same direction. And larger the organization, the longer that it takes. Once you get people rowing that direction, it's over. Like if I could get, I'll say a large financial institution, looking at, or I'll use insurance as a good example. If you get large insurance institutions to look at what Lemonade has done, to the insurance industry, which is I'm insured in under 90 seconds. Like all the red tape that created big insurance companies, that's within 90 minutes. Okay, like they anchored their whole company around what I care about as a customer. Like, can I get insured? And if something happens to me, will you give me my money? And it's because those other large companies can't get you a check. Like you always wonder, like, man, if I get in a wreck, what am I going to get like deducted, or like what copay, like what are all these hurdles I'm going to have to go through to get my cash? And Lemonade's just like, nope, like let's just do everything we possibly can. Let's organize humans, technology, mission, vision, strategy all the way through. If I could do that with a big insurance company, I mean, they would mow Lemonade, just because they would have the resources, the capacity, the human beings, the passion, the inertia to take that problem down. But it would require me 2 years of effort probably to get everyone on that same sheet of same sheet of music. And then, we could go make a massive.
It's interesting because I think, maybe we talk about pace right now, because that's a huge part of that. But I know, at least if I was to talk about the feeling that I had when I saw directed discovery at work, like I was blown away. And I had to think about it, because when I saw the teams actually conducting as many interviews as you talk about, right? I was like, in my mind, I was like, well, how do you scale that? Like I couldn't fathom it. But also what's interesting, I guess, and maybe we can talk about this, but is, I think the idea of a startup and the idea of, moving towards uncertainty, or in terms of your book, right? Chasing confidence, right? Like there's this idea that we have to be confident enough that we are getting to confidence through the work of the people that are closest to the team. Whereas maybe, I don't know, like the larger organizations that it's harder to scale that kind of thing. Is it that they're already so confident in what they know and what they're good at that we're not willing to, be able to take a step back and say, we're okay being a little unconfident right now and chase, like in terms of your book, chasing that confidence, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I could put my own personal bias in it. I mean, I have general, terms that I don't think are super useful. I think there's a little of both. I mean, staring up at a multi-billion-dollar company, a multi-billion-dollar company has a lot of options. Like they've worked hard to have all those options. So one of those options could be, well, when they get big enough, we'll just take them out. Like we'll go through an acquisition. So like what I like about I guess the question you're asking is there's a lot of game theory that's going to happen because why did Lemonade create, like, you have the founders, you have the founding team, you have all those people, were they going for a strategic acquisition to get taken out by a big dog? I mean, that might have been the motivation, or is it like, no, they're committed to morals, ethics, and values of like wanting to disrupt a market and industry that's been so lazy that even if they got a massive $1 billion offer, it's like, we're committed to take them down. And so like, that is some fun game theory to think about. When you think about larger organizations, like, they're going through that same innovation discussion of like, well, if they bring up, could we make it a strategic? Can we spin something out and hire, a third party and create a labs environment? Like, there's lots of optionality that they have, which is, like, to your point, Josh, causes the headwinds of, when we're in the middle of a company looking up, out and down, it's like, you can't see any of that. It's ridiculous. Like, why wouldn't this, like, we have all of these people and all of these resources, and this, you can see the innovation that's killing us in market. Why aren't you doing anything about it? And it's, a lot of that is maybe just context that we don't know. Like, they do have a lot of options.
Yeah.
And, maybe they've got a strategic M&A team already working your competitor over for an acquisition price,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
maybe they've already put some money over here in a pocket and labs, experiment. And then, hey, look, guys, we need to keep the lights on. We need to keep the core business going. And so, like, let's just keeping core customer base really, really happy on recurring revenue goals. I mean, I've seen that play out in every scenario. Like, every large company that I've walked into, it's like, hey, come in and change. When you actually get up and start having conversations through an organization, but specifically at the boards and the top, you're like, okay, they know all of this that's happening, and they've got a couple of different balls in the air, and they're going to see which one ends up getting some significant traction across the business.
Yeah. Well, let's then, because I think it's important. One of the most refreshing things that I know it stuck out in my mind was the topic of pace, because I think if somebody dives into what does this really look like, they go and read your book. I would just talk about pace as it relates to directed discovery, and we can even talk about what's also interesting. I know it stood out to Spencer and I, the fact that you've been with the same team for 3 years. The same team over 3 different companies, I believe, is what it was.
Yep.
So that talk about pace when you think about directed discovery, but also, as that relates to why you continue to work with the same team over 3 different companies.
Yeah. So, I mean, the core team, I couldn't do it like that. That's kind of like, I'll just say this right up front. Like, I can't do this by myself.
Yeah.
They're, that may be the best articulated answer, since, we're talking music, Delta bluegrass, jazz. Ken Norton gave a great talk at Mind the Product around like all the different roles that people need to play in order for things to really be successful. And if you look at the people that I've had between Mariah and Gil and Kenji, all the people that have been on my teams, they are experts in a certain domain. Like, a good use case here is, Gil, for all intents and purposes. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
It's okay.
That was Gil, by the way.
Let him join.
That's so funny. So I would say that Gil, if you were at Pluralsight when we first started, I was hired as the chief product officer. I hired Gil, to come back as the head of product and design. He was the lead UX designer at the time. And when we broke, the teams up and the functions up, there were a lot of people that loved reporting to Gil way more than reporting to me. And it's just because of his communication style and how humble he is, and, the way he designs and the way he thinks and the way he approaches problems. And I think as a leader, like, if you are committed to looking good, and, you have your own stuff that's going on, and you want to try and surround a team, you're trying to hold dominion over that team because you want to be the person. And if you don't grab a hold of that pretty quick, there's no way it's scaling, because you're going to oppress the people around you and the teams that report into you, because you have to be the person with the best idea. And I'm not committed to the best idea at all. I'm committed to the best outcome. which looks like human beings and our products being adopted widely, loving it, wanting to give us recurring revenue for it. And that goes for social impact as well. Like how many lives could we actually impact through marginalized education in marginalized communities? Well, if we can give them a world-class education experience, could they be a wage earner as great as a Bay Area developer? Well, that's the goal. Like, so I don't care about how we get there. And who like on the team provides those ideas to get there. So that's like concept number one. That has a ton to do with pacing, by the way. Like if you have a leader that comes into a business that's committed to the way they look, good luck. I mean, that's 3, 4, 5 years. If you want to see something happen in 60 days, you use the entire team as the chief product officer and individual contributors. That means I need to get on a computer or I need to do interviews. I actually have to get in. This is the Martha Stewart magic. Like I have to get in and be a practitioner and bake the cookies. I have to say, hey, these are the subtle nuances that will speed up the process and the effort. So on the onset, you have to do it. And that doesn't matter if you're working for a $2 billion company or a startup tomorrow. Like that is a way of leadership that has to land into the business in order for people to evangelize and adopt it. And by the way, when you go into a big company, I mean, it will be organ rejection. They will wonder, why is this person's, what's their motives? These motives are different. Like I'm used to this ladder that needs to be climbed. By the way, corporate structure is engineered that way behaviorally, incents, gives cash compensation. So you have to be able to fight the headwinds of performance-based compensation too. And so you can't, like when you come in, none of those rules apply to you as that leader. So that is like what dictates the pace. Is who am I going to be when I land on the ground and I start to work with these teams? And they're going to question me for, OC Tanner, it took me 9 months to win all of the hearts and minds across the business. And I would say I won 80%. There's still 20% that were like, no, never. I will never, ascribe to do any of the stuff that he's talking about. So, I mean, that is, I think that's the definition of like how pacing is going to start. I'd say the second most important piece there is I talk about KT velocity in the book, Knowledge Transfer Velocity, which is, depending on how big or small the company is, when you're 30 or 40 people, we transfer knowledge amongst us like so fast and we have tools. But when you're 8,000 people or 3,000 or 5,000 people, getting everyone to know the same thing. So that's organizational design and structure. Like you have to knock down big middle management layers and get like communication, the continuity of that communication directly to the people that are building and selling your products. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I love that. I'm interested in knowing as well around, I don't know if we're ready to go here, but certainly to understand where you go next, right, in your future journey, and how you're using directed discovery in different ways, right? Maybe it's for the book, how you used it for the book. Josh, you mentioned it earlier before the conversation, but also how you're using it now to find the right problems. Maybe you've already found it, but I mean, maybe talk about that. It would be super interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's problems in anything like finding a problem or finding a product for the problem. I think is relatively easy. I think like the fortitude, the commitment, the vision of getting a bunch of folks outside of myself organized around it is probably it's really hard. Because you're going to have a mission, a vision, and its core values established, and then you're going to have to really believe in order to keep. And I think long-term sustainable growth. This isn't hyper growth. This isn't like 100% CAGR. This is like growing a legitimate business for 10, 15, or 20 years. Like that's the mindset. Everyone's so short-sighted. Like everyone's a 5 or 7 year exit. Like I don't ever walk into a problem thinking, gosh, I can't wait for my 5 to 7 year payday. It literally is. It's like you're putting a totally different outcome on the shelf for people to really organize their lives around. And I mean that genuine. Like when I say organize their lives, like this isn't something that people do around a constricted like time frame, especially post COVID. I mean, our daily lives and our work lives, that daily fabric is now woven together. Like we have been forced to weave it together. And so the things that people do behaviorally on a day-to-day basis completely change. I actually think this is one of the biggest concepts like in the world that we should be talking about right now, which is, the fabric of our life is like somebody took at the end of the bed and just shook it and it's laying differently on the foot of the bed now. And so all the behavioral patterns, the things that we do as a society will forever be different. And I think I look at it as a huge upside and opportunity, to take some things that were really inefficient and make them much more efficient. So that's like item number one. Number two is just my own, like I'm no different than I think anyone else is, can I be convicted to something for, 10 or 15 years and organize folks around it? And I think these are areas of interest that I've really dove pretty hard into. But I think the future of living needs to change quite a bit. I have 4 sons. I have a graduating senior this year. So these are problems that are close to me, right? Like finding the problems is pretty easy. Like a problem that's really close for me, I have a lot of bias around, is I don't think the future of living looks like a 30-year mortgage for my 4 sons. Like I don't see them, given what technology has done and just the behavior loops they're in between Instagram, Facebook, like all of the video games, everything that sits around their world. They're all digital natives. Everything is expediency bias. Everything is now. And it's like, well, hey, can we as a society want to change it? Yeah, we could. I don't know if we want to. And I feel like that's so far down the path now that, I don't see the current tools and or our current best thinking changing much than the path that we're already on. And so that's like a time to say, okay, could you build some really fun innovation there for this targeted group? And I kind of always break customers into 3 groupings, a third. High net worth individuals, right? You kind of have the middle market, you have lower income, and then you have underrepresented minorities, that 4th category that's outside of that triangle. And so when I think, well, total addressable market, sellable addressable market, and then SOM, which is the thing that product folks should care about, which is your serviceable market. Hey, the company has these resources, and could it actually give this great likelihood to buy, length of stay, and happiness curve to this customer over and over and over again? And I think housing is super interesting. So I'll get right to the point. I think subscription housing could be super fun. I think sustainable subscription housing could be really fun to take a really hard look at. And I just think, Avin, he's going to want, power, water, sewer, and his mortgage all to be into one unified experience. He can't come up with 50K, 100K. It's ridiculous in today's world, especially in marginalized communities. Like that's not going to work. And also just the natural behavior curve of families. And I would say single individuals all the way to, people that grow families. I started out in 250 square feet, and then we'll end up at 3,800 square feet. And so the natural expansion and contraction now, when all my sons leave, like I'm probably pretty good to go back to 1,100 square feet, but I do want to have different experiences and move, around the world. And so, your ability to, create renewable energy. And the last thing I'll highlight here is only people are talking about one renewable energy source. Like when they think about, hey, I'm going to put solar on my house. It's like, man, there's a lot of other renewable options. There's wind turbines, there's hydro turbines, there's solar, right? There are already existing things that Mother Nature has provided to us that are a kit of parts that are super simple to harness, that already create sustainability. And so I think if you think about sustainability, you think about housing, you think about current technology and evolution, and then the customer, like where is the customer's mental capacity today? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of fun things to have a conversation over.
Fascinating. That's great. So I guess you're looking at, you're right in the thick of discovery. It sounds like. Do you and your customers at the moment are your sons and other people that you're listening to. Yeah, I want the tune. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, I know. Keep going. I'm just gonna bring it and tune it while you're talking.
Yeah, well, I mean, Josh, I'm just curious to know how at what stage you are right now. I don't mean the specifics, but really just well, I'm curious. Like, is Gil involved? Is other people involved in helping you figure this out? Anyway,
you wished. The thing that you should do, Gil is working on some. Well, Gil and I are lifelong friends. I mean, we're best friends. Like, nothing he does or I do, I can't ever think of us not doing a lot of stuff forever together. So is he involved? Absolutely. I mean, he's my best friend. He's my ride or die. Like he's my brother. So I mean, for sure, he's definitely taken a really hard look and banged it around. Gil, dude, I am really excited for what Gil is working on. Gil has some stuff where finally he's taken everything that he's got in there as a human being, and it is coming out. And so you're going to see, I think, some really cool stuff. And I'm talking like in the next week or two. Yeah, I mean, he's just killed it, like absolutely killed it. He's got some cool creative genius stuff. You'll be able to buy it too. Like, I mean, this is his works of art, if you will.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. Like,
That's
it's
amazing.
So cool.
We'll have to have him. It sounds like we need him on the
That's
the
what I was
podcast.
about to say.
I'd put Gil on this thing.
Absolutely.
I'd put Gil on this thing tomorrow. Let me just make sure I'm all square.
Yeah.
You guys can edit this part. So
absolutely.
But I don't want it like sounding all, poopy. So a cool little thing. I'm a big Martin guitar fan, but this guitar is a pre-war Gibson, and it's a J30, and it is like, I don't know. It's just kind of, as ridiculous as it sounds, has turned into one of my favorite, if not the favorite guitar. Okay.
All right.
No
Do you need an intro?
No. I'm just gonna rip it, dude. I'm gonna try and rip it. If I blow it, then oh well.
Let's go.
We're excited. Outro music. Okay, cool.
For those that are only listening, Nate picked up his guitar and he's about to play us a jam. So, but anyway, yeah, go for it.
There we go.
Brilliant.
Little open ditty.
Love it.
That was great.
Yep.
I mean, so literally we're at the beginning of this whole podcast journey, but already like that is one of the best closeouts I think we're ever going to have on the entire thing. But yeah, I mean, honestly, Nate, it's been incredible. I think I can talk about what it felt like to walk into Pluralsight, with, up until that point in my life, and it was mind blowing. But I feel like the same thing happened when I got to know you and what you represent and what you do. And it's just been a pleasure to be able to talk with you. I mean, to understand how you're mindful in certain moments and reflective in certain moments, but you're free enough to act on those moments. But then at the same time, you're thinking, how can I be committed to something long enough for 10 to 15 years? There's an interesting push and pull relationship there. And I think that's fascinating. And I would encourage everybody who doesn't know Nate to follow him where?
You can always follow me on Twitter. Twitter's kind of the best place, to follow everything that I'm doing. Everything I've ever written or produced is always on Medium for free. I need to get back out and write more. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. You guys are organizing this, and I think it's going to do a lot of good for the world right now. I think the interview candidates that you've chosen, they're they're really good people. They're fantastic humans. Brandon, I can't wait to listen to Brendan's, podcast. It's going to be good.
It is. And also, just everybody read Chasing Discovery. Check it out.
Chasing Confidence.
Oh, that's what I meant. Sorry, Chasing Confidence.
You want to say that again?
Maybe I should have renamed it to Chasing Discovery. I got to rename it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Chasing Confidence. But yeah, Nate, seriously, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Yeah, we want to have you back on.
Yeah,
absolutely. Want to see that structure finished and find out what's the next for you.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, Nate. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Swell podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast, sign up to our newsletter at theswellpod.com, and get in on the conversation through all major socials at the Swell Pod. We'll see you next time.